Hey there, Joel Hunter here, and today we are going to talk about fasting. Specifically, how to get ready for fasting, how to make it the most easy it possibly can be. One of the mistakes people make with fasting is to just try to dive right into it, which is very, very difficult. And so it's helpful to kind of know what you're doing as you get into it, and that's what this is about. There's going to be 5 things that you can do that can make fasting more successful right from the beginning. So to start with, you want to start with where you are. You have a certain biochemistry, and that has been brought about by life choices, both what you've put into your mouth, what you've done with your body. Your metabolic machinery is decided by those things, both what you eat and what you do. And so people will naturally be tilted more towards sugar burning all the time or more towards fat burning all the time. It's some combination between the two, but it generally leans one way or the other. And so when you're naturally a sugar burner, which most people are that are just eating normally, even if they're dieting, your body is going to be looking for sugar to burn. That means when you stop eating, even for a couple of hours, you're going to be really, really hungry because all of your metabolic machinery is ready to burn sugar, and all the metabolic machinery that would be fat burning, fat oxidizing, it's not there. It hasn't ramped up yet. So all the calories that you're carrying in the form of fat, they can't be accessed very effectively, and so you feel really, really hungry. So the first thing is just to know your body probably isn't in full-on fat burning mode right to begin with, which is why it's so hard to go between meals. That one is more psychological because if you start off thinking this is just impossible, I don't know how this is going to be doable, it's helpful to know that it gets easier as your metabolism changes. So step 2 is to start leaning your metabolism towards that change. And that specifically is to cut out added sugar, period. So sugar hides in many, many foods. Most of them come in boxes or packages or bags, basically things that aren't whole, unprocessed foods. Almost all of them have added sugar to it. And so if you can cut that stuff out of your diet, usually for a week or two before you're trying to do anything with fasting, it's really, really helpful. And the reason for that is you don't have to be in full-on ketosis, which means you have no carbohydrates for a period of 48 to 72 hours, something like that. You don't have to go full-on ketosis, only fat-burning mode in order to lean your body more towards the ability to release fat from fat cells and then oxidize that fat for energy. Generally, your body's going to be leaning more towards I'm in sugar burning mode or fat burning mode, and cutting added sugar out of your diet will help ramp up that metabolic machinery that makes fat burning, fat oxidizing easier. Because the goal of all of this stuff is we want to have the energy that we need, but just from calories that we're already storing in fat on our body, rather than more extra calories that we're trying to put into our mouth. The third tip here is to eat meals and not snacks. At some point in the 80s or 90s, the idea that you're supposed to eat tons of small meals throughout the day, lots of snacking in between meals, it took over. And there's really not any scientific basis for that. As a matter of fact, our bodies are built to take in energy at mealtime and then to have that energy sustain us for whatever period of time we need until our next meal. And so for most of human history, that would be a specific discrete meal, and then you wouldn't have anything at all until your next specific discrete meal. And that would allow your blood sugar levels to rise during the meal and then fall, and as they fell, your body was able to ramp up fat oxidation to carry you through. Generally, that post-absorptive phase of a meal is somewhere in the range of 4 hours, depending on how big the meal is and your specific metabolism. But letting yourself get past that window to where you're actually using your own fat for energy is really helpful. We do this every night when we go to sleep. It's just easier because we're asleep, so we're not awake to be hungry for it. If you can increase the number of times that you are letting your body burn fat for energy, it will ramp up that metabolic machinery so that burning your own fat for energy is easier. And probably the easiest way to start that is to eat your breakfast and then nothing until lunch, and then eat lunch and nothing till dinner, and so on. Eating meals instead of snacking is the third tip here on how to start doing this fasting stuff. The fourth one of these tips is breakfast time. So they say breakfast is the most important meal of the day. That slogan was actually started by a food company, not a scientist of any kind, because there's no scientific research to back up breakfast being the most important meal of the day. It's probably In all truth, the least important meal of the day. That said, there's no reason to just jump straight into trying to skip breakfast if you're trying to work your way into fasting for the first time. Instead, be really specific and deliberate about your breakfast choice. And by that I mean you want something that has high protein and high fat. What's the most perfect breakfast food there is? Eggs. Eggs are a source of almost equal amounts of fat and protein. And what it's got none of is sugar. And sugar at breakfast time is really, really common. Every cereal and pastry and Pop-Tart and donut, all of these things are giving us sugar at probably the worst possible time to have it, because what it's going to do is it's going to let us get out the door, get to work, and then the sugar crash happens, and then we're really, really, really hungry. That's why snacking between breakfast and lunch is so incredibly common. It's because we have all of these sugars at breakfast time that don't leave us full and satiated for long enough. So switching your breakfast out goes a really, really long way to helping your body learn this idea of food comes in and then you don't need any food for a while, because once that goes away, you've got your own fat stores to use, and then you can make it all the way to lunch. So having a high protein, high fat breakfast is really, really helpful to start off with. And then the last of these tips, this is tip number 5 on how to start fasting, on how to make the transition into fasting easier, is to drink water before your meals and after your meals. So it's really common after a meal to feel like, boy, I really could just use a little bit extra, you know? That's probably where dessert came from. I don't know. But either way, we don't need that food after we've already eaten. And so drinking water before a meal helps us to eat enough that we're actually full but not overly stuffed. And then drinking water after a meal is something that helps remove the desire to snack after meals. The reason this one matters so much is at breakfast, it's helpful to have the water afterwards because it helps get you through to lunch. Same thing at lunch. But the big one is dinner time, because it's really common. By far the most common time to just snack outside of a regular mealtime is after dinner. It's just something we've gotten used to over time. It's a habit that's been built up, and our metabolic machinery has been built up to support that the same way. And so a good way to break that habit is to just drink a big old glass of water after dinner. You'll be shocked at the difference in how full you feel after dinner before a glass of water and after a glass of water. And a lot of times it can be the difference between going to the cabinet and finding a bunch of Oreos or not. All of this is to help make it so that you only eat at meal times and don't have any snacks between meal times. After that becomes commonplace for you, moving on into the actual extended fasting phase becomes much, much easier, which is just going to start with lengthening the time between dinner and breakfast. We'll get more into that in later videos, but those are the top 5 tips. To repeat them one more time, it's to not worry that your biochemistry isn't perfect for fasting to start off with. Can you tell I have the list just down here? I do. Second is to cut sugar out completely, because it's totally antithetical to what you're trying to do with your metabolic machinery. The third one is to eat your meals, but not have snacks in between. The fourth is to have a high-fat, high-protein breakfast. And lastly, drink water before meals and after meals, because it'll do a whole lot to keep you from getting so hungry that you feel like you need a snack. That's it. Those 5 things are all things that I learned the hard way, but hopefully this was a little bit easier way for you to find out about it. Oh, and I keep forgetting, I'm supposed to say to subscribe. So feel free to subscribe. And we'll talk more than just fasting. There'll be all sorts of other stuff going on, mostly in the nutritional and fitness realm. But if you want to subscribe, awesome. All right, I'll see you next time.